Former Prime Minister of Britain, Blair, says despite the turbulence witnessed in some African countries, the continent is on the path to success. Former British Prime Minister Blair says he is optimistic that in the next half of this century, Africa could become an engine of prosperity, capable of lifting millions out of poverty and positioning itself as a major player in the global economy. But Mr. Blair says the West needs to support African leaders to build capacity.
We work alongside the leader, and that leader's got to be wanting the best for his country, not corrupt, trying to make the thing work. And what we focus on then is making his life better in order to make his people's life better by building that effective capacity around him. So
Mr. Blair says he established the African Governance Initiative, AGI, to help African leaders build that capacity. He says African leaders tell him that they need practical support in creating systems to help them deliver on priorities.
So making sure we sort out what are the priorities, bringing in expertise to meet them, making sure that he's got around him just a functioning private office. Sometimes with the leaders of these countries, even things like sorting out their scheduling, how they make sure they're going to focus on the priorities that are going to deliver change to their people, and then helping them deliver those. That is the important thing that we do, really.
Mr. Blair says there is truth to the common criticism that most African leaders know what they must do to develop their countries, but choose to do nothing.
There's a lot of truth in that, but it's not always because they're badly motivated or badly intentioned. Often with these leaders, there's nothing there. But for a lot of these countries, the president takes a decision, nothing happens. Nothing happens. So, reforming and changing those systems of government are really, really important. And that the gap between intentions and action is often capacity. It's not an absence of will.
Blair's engagement in Africa started when he was British Prime Minister. From that office in 2004, Mr. Blair launched the Commission for Africa. It was meant to help push Africa out of poverty. Mr. Blair says a lot has been achieved since then.
If you look at Africa today, despite some very bad examples of what's happening, overall the pattern is very clear. There's increasing levels of democratic government, more and more elections properly held, and the Africa Commission actually established a peer review group mechanism, which many countries have now gone through, in which there's quite a rigorous and assertive process of analysing whether countries are living up to democratic expectations or not. So, I think you'd have to say that yes, the challenges are very clear, there's still a long way to go, but there's a lot of progress being made.
Mr. Blair has been a strong voice for increased aid to Africa and debt cancellation. While some argue that aid often only ends up in the pockets of corrupt politicians, Mr. Blair says a lot has changed in the way aid is dispensed in Africa.
But I think the development community has been adapting and changing a lot, and the aid that's going in today is very often either directed to very specific things like the PEPFAR program that President Bush established, and has, let's be clear, saved hundreds of thousands of lives. It's an amazing program. So those aid, when it's going into very specific programs like that, I think people can see the real benefit. And the rest of it is I think increasingly we should be adjusting and adapting so that it is building that sustainable capacity to get things done within governments. But it's always a hard call when you're saying to your own people, look, times are tough and budgets are strapped, but nonetheless we want to give money to poorer countries. However, I believe very strongly it is an investment for our future. If with many of these countries today, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa, if they go wrong, the consequences will come on us eventually.
Blair says there is a need for a new partnership between the international community and Africa, but the West also needs to help African countries take ownership of their development.